I want to talk to you now about separating the concept from birthing better skills. For the 50 years that I've been doing this, people have really been a bit confused about that. It's understandable, and it got understandable later on because technology wasn't available for me to put the skills into a mixed media resource until the late 1990s. The concept was something which was being discussed in a public sphere. So when I gave birth in 1970, there was a concept around childbirth. The concept in the generations prior to that was basically you never know what your birth's going to be like. That was about it. And therefore, there's nothing you can really do about it. So when Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed, three amazing male obstetricians, came forward with a concept that said low-risk women who use these skills should be able to achieve a natural birth, pain-free labor without medical interventions. That was a concept. I gave birth in that concept. And the skills that were available were Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed. And that was it. So when I started to work as a body worker with pregnant families, along with people with disability and older women whose bodies had been damaged from childbirth and all sorts of other body issues, the expectant families and I talked a wee bit about birth. I didn't want to talk about a lot of stuff because it's never been my political interest. So I was a body worker, and if people had issues around childbirth, then they needed to talk to somebody who had an interest in it. And back in the early 70s, we lacked choices. The conversation was just beginning to be about, something, I don't know. But we also developed skills. The families, as I said in the last video, didn't feel included in the concept or the ideas of Bradley, Grantley, Dick Reed, and Lamaze. One is many women had painful labors. So they didn't get that pain-free part of it. A lot of women are scared or anxious about birth, so they didn't get that part of it. The Lamaze breathing skills you couldn't sustain for hours. Just not possible. Bradley seemed like a good idea in the nose and out the mouth, but you can breathe in your nose and out your mouth and scream or moan or sound really distressed as well as focused and relaxed. So we understood as just people that I worked with that the concept that was being given and had been given since the late 1950s wasn't inclusive. And families I worked with just wanted to be included. I mean, every family values their baby's birth. And to have a concept that doesn't value their baby's birth because they're not low risk, it just didn't make any sense. And not to be valued because you feared childbirth, you had painful labor, that didn't make sense, right? Without medical care, most families in my generation were glad there was medical care. And nobody understood what the word natural birth was because then 95% of us were laboring because there was only a 5% cesarean rate because there was such major abdominal surgery, because the medical profession didn't have the skills to do anything but that. So we developed the concept, which was 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. We've got to do the activity of birthing our baby one way or another. We should all become skilled. And then all there was Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed. We knew that, but we became skilled and just decided we'd use the skills to the best of our ability. But we also started to develop the birthing better skills, and developing the skills were in response to the fact that the first skills methods, Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed, were the first, and they weren't very sophisticated. They weren't adjustable skills, they weren't adaptable skills, they weren't sustainable, and they certainly didn't deal with a broad range of areas that most of us were dealing with individually in our birth. I mean, you had a niggling labor, you'd like to have a skill to deal with that. You hated birth. How do you manage when you don't like what's happening? Right? Things like that. But for the first 10 years, the only skills that we developed really were just improving the skills that were already there, because we weren't evolving those skills. We were thinking about how to develop skills that worked more effectively for all of us, both as birthing women and birth coaches. So in the 70s, there weren't any birth plans, and fathers still were birth coaches. But it's really important that you separate the concept from the birthing better skills. And that's why we're saying for the first 6 months, if you get involved, just focus on the concept. We'll introduce phase 2, which is about birthing better skills and certain elements of it, but I don't want to confuse you now. We want you to know that our trust holds the concept. That concept is inclusive of all skills-based methods, not the information messages like what to expect when you're expecting, but really skills-based methods. Lamaze, Bradley, Grantley Dick Reed really wasn't a skills-based method. It was sort of like a belief system. Just don't be afraid of birth, and then sort of use slow breathing. But hypnobirthing, hypnobabies, birthing within, calm birth, birthing better, and there will be others. So we want to add to that handout, not detract from it. So we want you to be really clear. The concept is an idea. It has goals and results. At the moment, the goals and results we want you to focus on is just families choosing to learn some skills. And then you just notating what skills they've learned and asking them after the birth, how do they work? Just keep it simple, stupid. That's the KISS principle. And we want this to be simple. We don't want this to be complex. Because if it's simple, then you can say to the people you work with, tell your friends and relatives who are pregnant to become skilled and give them the handout. That's how messages change. They become the 100th monkey. They become the tipping point. They begin to roll through and people start to hear them. And if they're simple and simply expressed and inclusive, then they're more likely to take off. And you understand this because you understand that the natural birth message that's been being given is not inclusive. And you understand that that has an impact on people who either achieve a natural birth or don't achieve a natural birth or can't have a natural birth or don't want a natural birth. But every baby's birth is important to that family. And every woman who is awake, she's unconscious, she can't use skills, but if she's awake, every one of us can use some level of skills when we are doing the activity of birthing our baby. And we'll discuss all of this. Birth is physiological. It happens, but it happens as an activity. And if we use skills to do the activity, we always birth better. But most of us are not informed to become skilled. So if it just happens to us, and we have a belief system that it happens to us in a way that is tolerable to us and is engaging for us and is sustainable for us no matter how long it takes and is a delightful experience and a highlight experience with a good outcome, then you know you're only talking to a very few number of people. And before I close this short video so that you understand the concept, versus the skills. One of the things that was clear right away in the early 70s was when I talked to people who were strong birth advocates. They basically fell into two groups, with a third group kind of sort of. One group were women who had had great birth experiences, and they wanted other women to have their great birth experience and thought that every woman could, that their birth experience was just either what they did or how they thought or how they acted. Or there were women, group two, who had terrible birth experiences and wanted other women to have better birth experiences. Their reasons for having had bad experiences were many reasons. It was terribly painful. It lasted a very long time. I didn't like what was done to or around me, and that wasn't always medical. It was sometimes the husband, right? So, and the third group were people who just got into birth. But it was these two groups. I had a great birth. It should be something everyone can achieve. I had a terrible birth. Women shouldn't have a terrible birth. That have really been the core basis for all of the childbirth conversation. There are very few people, groups three, that don't care. And don't care is I lack judgment. My birth is important to me, but your birth is important to you. Your birth is important to you. You consider my birth, what, important to you? Why would that be? And that's where we've gotten quite confused. So the people I worked with wanted to develop a concept, an idea, and to be able to give it words and to give it actions that 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth, and it's an activity we're doing, and that we should just be doing it with skills. Now, why, if it's natural and normal and physiological, did we want skills? Because those of us who used Lamaze or Bradley, as imperfect as they were, knew that skills worked, because we could project backward and say, if I didn't have those skills, boy, I'd have a different experience. So we knew skills worked, and when you could look at it broadly, we knew that multiple millions of men and women, fathers and mothers, who use particularly Lamaze and Bradley to a lesser extent because it wasn't taught as extensively, that what obstetricians in the U.S. and obstetrical nurses in the U.S. saw from the late 50s to the mid-70s was multiple millions. Get that? Multiple millions of mothers and fathers who used those skills, as imperfect as they were, and we reduced our suffering. We coped better. We managed better. We worked through birth better. We handled it better. We worked together better. We both had skills. We stayed on top of what was happening to and around us. We felt more in control. You see, everything has words that are flexible, just like the concept. You find your own way of saying it clearly. You're pregnant. Learn some skills. Use them to do the activity. Any way you want to say it. Lamaze and Bradley functionally helped the largest group of people to deal with the number 2 topic in childbirth globally, which is suffering. The number 1 topic is we want a mother and a baby to be alive after the birth. And the number 3 topic is recovery after the birth, lifelong recovery, which is still a very hidden issue. But as chiropractors, you work with people. As a body worker, I worked with people my age who had not recovered physically from this normal, natural, physiological process called childbirth. So understand the concept is separate than any of the skills-based methods. It's inclusive of all the skills-based methods. And in time, I will talk to you more about the skills that ordinary men and women like yourself and like me developed that part of it was originally called the pink kit that Jeannie had and is now called Birthing Better and is inclusive of all of the skills within this group of skills.